welcome to a new video. Everyone settle in because this video is a long one. I have all the necessities. I have my book, I have my water, I have a coffee, but most importantly, I have my lip gloss. Now we can finally start this video. First off, I want to say I am a little bit sick, so please excuse my voice or my nose if it sounds a little bit squeaky or kind of harsh. It's because I'm kind of going through a cold, and by kind of, I mean, I'm going through a cold. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. This is a very exciting one because I will be sharing with you every single book I read in 2024. I'm just going to go over the books in chronological order and how I read them throughout the year, and I'm going to give you what I scored them. So let's get started. First and foremost, here's my ranking guide that I have made for myself. This is how I rank books, and it's supposed to give you a little bit of insight as to why some of these books got the score that they did. Some people do it differently. This is just how I do it, and obviously reading is a personal experience. It goes without saying that these are just my opinions. If you enjoyed a book that I didn't love, that's completely fine. It just might be my experience with reading it was a little bit different than yours. At the end of the day, this is all subjective. If you like a book, continue loving a book. That's what makes this life so great. I think those are all the disclaimers I have before we actually dive in. Oh no, one more thing. I didn't read a lot of books this year. I think at the moment of filming this, I have read 34 books, and I don't think I'm going to finish another before the year ends. A little bit of more information about me. I do work full time, and I was going through a lot of life changes through this year. I graduated college, I moved out, I started a full-time corporate job, and I don't read and do YouTube for a living. So naturally, I'm not gonna read 100 books a year like other people do. It's just not realistic for me, and that's totally okay. So I read 34 books this year, and if you read more or if you read less, good for you. As long as you read to enjoy the books, that's all that really matters. But anyways, let's begin. The first book I read this year is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and I gave this book 3 stars. The reason I got this book was because everyone on Book Talk was talking about it. Everyone and their mother was saying how it's a tragic love story and it's so sad and it's so beautiful, so I decided to pick it up. I ended up giving it 3 stars just because I thought it was a little slow. I think the pacing of the book was a little tough for me to get through it, if I'm being honest. I kind of would push myself to finish it. I did think it was really tragic. I do like the ending, and I do like the way the tragedy was written. It's just more the pacing at the beginning and the middle that made me give it 3 stars. So the next book I read was Never Finished by David Goggins. So this is his second book, and this is kind of like a memoir style book. So if you don't know, David Goggins, he was a Navy SEAL, and now he does a lot of like physical challenges, if you will. So this is his second book. I gave this book 5 stars. I consider David Goggins my favorite nonfiction writer or author, and his books are literally my favorite nonfiction books. I think everyone on this planet should read David Goggins' books. You will learn so much about yourself. I like these books so much that I try to read either the first one or the second one every single year, because it's one of those books that I think it's a really good reminder to read every single year. So 5 stars. So next I read Flawless by Elsie Silver, and oh my goodness, this book series is 5 stars. Now, this specific book is 4 stars. I thought it was great. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was a great book to start the series with, but overall, highly recommend all the Chestnut Spring series. And honestly, at this point, I don't know who hasn't read these books. Haven't, and if you love romance, especially small town cowboy romance, you cannot go wrong. Highly recommend. 4 stars. Then I read The Bodyguard by Catherine Center, and I gave this 4 stars. I thought this was a really good book. This book got me out of a book slump. There is no spice in this, so it's one of those like cute little romance stories. I really enjoyed it. It didn't rock my world by any sense. That's why I got 4 stars, but I think everyone would really enjoy reading this book. Next is Normal People by Sally Rooney. This is my first controversial rating of the video, so I ended up giving this book 2 stars, and I have a whole reading vlog about it, and I talk about the book with spoilers. So if you want to fully know my thoughts on it, please go look at that video. But this book just wasn't for me. I don't like books where they don't have any plot, and this book was one of them. They're mainly just about the characters, and in the end, I just didn't love it. I didn't love the characters, therefore I just didn't really enjoy the book. This isn't a book that was meant for my liking, and you can see that through my scoring. So I read it, I gave it a shot. So many people talk about this book, and I will be leaving it in my bookshelf. I might donate it just because I will never touch it again, and honestly I will never pick up another Sally Rooney book again, just because she is not the type of author that I'm interested in, and that's fine. That's totally fine. So we're just gonna leave that to the side. Then I read Beach Read by Emily Henry. I actually really did enjoy this book. I ended up giving it a 4 stars. My only thing, and I say this every single time I talk about this book, is I was expecting this to be a romance book, and to me it doesn't really read like a romance book. It kind of reads like a literary fiction book. I was way more interested on like the personal growth and stories on these characters and not their romance, kind of like their personal lives that had nothing to do with each other. I liked that part of the book more than the romance. This is a lot of people's favorite Emily Henry book, and I can see why, because I have read some of her other books, and I do think that this is one of her better books. I also think that the female main character was a lot more interesting. We explored her a lot more than the male main character, so I felt like it wasn't, like I couldn't give it a fair chance at a romance book just because we explored so much of this character and not of this one. Next is To Sir Philip with Love by Julia Quinn. So if you don't know, this is the Bridgerton series. Yes, that Bridgerton, the one from Netflix. They're actually based off of books, and every single sibling has a book, just like every single season has a romance story. This is Eloise's book. I ended up giving this a 3 stars just because it wasn't my favorite. I really enjoyed Julia Quinn and this whole book series, so I do recommend you read all of them. Anthony is my favorite, and then probably Bennett. I'm so sorry, let's wait. That literally flew right over my head. No wonder it was so loud. But anyways, I think Anthony and Benedict's are my personal favorite, but I still highly recommend the whole series. So the next book I have is The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. A lot of people love this book. A lot of people love Sarah Adams. And unfortunately, I didn't love it. So I gave it a 2 stars. I also went a lot more in detail with my thoughts on another video, so I will link it below. But overall, if I'm remembering correctly, I thought it was a little cringy. The romance was a little cringy and the characters were a little cringy, so it was kind of really like a little clunky trying to read this. It didn't feel as smooth and as natural as some of the other romance writers that I'm gonna mention. So unfortunately, I gave this a 2 stars. I think the premise of it is still pretty good. It's just more in the execution. It wasn't really my style. So the next book I have is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. So this is her debut novel. There's also a show by Apple TV starring Brie Larson. I gave this book a 5 stars. I loved this book. It is a little long, but honestly, I thought it was so good. I know people don't love it, and people have a lot of criticisms of it, and I can see some of those, and I agree with some of those, but overall, I think sometimes a book is so good in other areas that it kind of gives itself a little room for some of the other areas not being as good, and this is how I feel about this book. I was really indecisive between a 4.5 and 5 stars, but then in the end I decided it was 5 stars because I kept thinking about it. I go and I rewatch the show all the time because I really love this story, and I feel like it's so interesting, and the premise is really creative, and it has a really good romance in it. So I think it has so many good qualities to it if you can kind of look over some of like the not best decisions. But overall, I actually really liked it. I highly recommend, and this was a 5 stars. All right, so the next book, I have a lot of opinions about the next book because everyone on Book Talk, specifically Book Talk, not BookTube, everyone was talking about this book. Everyone was talking about how amazing it was. I'm gonna give you a hint. It's a hockey romance. I love hockey romance. Oh my gosh, Elle Kennedy, love those books. Yeah, there's a lot of things wrong with them, sure, but hockey romance are elite type of romances, and everyone was talking about this book, and so I went and I picked it up. This made me not want to trust Book Talk's opinion ever again, and it is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. First of all, so much spice, and then it was also meaningless spice, which at least with the Elsie Silver books, there's spice, but it's like, it makes sense for the characters, it makes sense at where they are in life, and I feel like the spice is a little like realistic with how some of the scenarios that some of the tropes are set in, but this book had spice just to have spice. And then, if I'm remembering correctly, because I truly tried to take this book out of my head. Oh, I forgot. I gave this a 2 stars. I literally gave this a 2 stars. I got so upset halfway through reading this book because I was like, no way did I just spend so much money, so much time reading this. It just made me so angry. But I remember thinking, I don't understand what is happening through the plot. Like, how can I explain this? I think I explained it better in another video, so I am gonna tag it below as well. You know how sometimes it feels like stuff in movies happens not because it would realistically happen, but just so that we can get to a certain plot in the next, like, so we can continue the plot of the story. That's what this book felt like. It felt like it was a little unrealistic and things were just happening so that some of the things would make sense. I don't remember much about these characters other than I did not enjoy my reading experience, and when I finished this book I was so upset. Don't read this book. I'm sorry. I feel like a lot of books I can understand why people love it, even if it's not for me, but that is a book where I didn't understand why people love it. And I will need someone to truly explain to me what makes this book good, because I was looking for it and I didn't find it. I'm sorry. Is that mean? It's just, I don't recommend it. Let's move on. So the next book I got was Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. And this is one of those books where I think people are very critical of. And this is one of those books where I understand the criticism of it. And I ended up giving this like a 4.5. That's a little high. I fully understand that. But for some reason, this book imprinted into me for so long. I finished this book and then I couldn't pick up another book because I just kept thinking about this one. It honestly kind of put me in a little bit of a reading slump. So I feel like that deserves some sort of credit. I understand it's really cheesy. It's really cheesy and there is a lot of spice and some of it is meaningless. So I can be honest about the books that I like and some of like their bad qualities. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not gonna lie. And it is really, really long for a romance book. Could it have been shorter? Yes, it could have. And it probably should have. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what was happening. I thought the premise was really creative, actually. I didn't hate it. I actually liked it. So this might be more controversial than me not liking some of the other books, is the fact that I enjoyed this one, because I know so many people did not. That's all I have to say. And then the next book I have is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. So I discovered Abby Jimenez this year and on this channel. And let me tell you, I love Abby Jimenez. There's also some criticism on her books about the characters just not knowing how to don't know how to communicate, and all of the problems could be solved through just talking it out. But you have to understand that with romance books, there has to be some sort of problem. In order for a book to be interesting, there has to be a problem that we eventually get to the resolution of. And I actually found that this book and the way their problems were, and they kind of went through the problems, it wasn't very annoying. I feel like the problem with some romance books is that they are predictable, they are cheesy, and then the problems that they have tend to be really annoying because of how predictable and cheesy they are. But I didn't think this was the case with Abby Jimenez books. I actually think her writing style is really, really good, and a lot of people can understand it and read it. And I think her characters are very insightful, and yes, they are flawed, but they are human, which is why they are flawed. We love Abby Jimenez on this channel. Abby Jimenez is a 5-star author, and I will accept no Abby Jimenez slander. So then I read That One Night by Emily Rath. I don't own this book, which I'm very happy I don't. This is the novella of the Jackson Rays hockey series, and again, hockey series. These books are just getting me in trouble. So I wanted to read the series, but I started with the novella, and I'm so happy I did, because I did start reading the first book and then I ended up DNFing it halfway through. Oh, by the way, I'm so sorry. I gave it a 2 stars. If you've ever even picked up the book, I think you would really quickly find out why. I ended up DNFing the first book. What do you need to know about it? It's all spice. Eventually, it makes no sense. It's too long, and then nothing really happens for like the first 150 pages. If you want to read just spice, I think that's the book for you. I don't mind spice, but I do want there to be a plot. And this book just didn't really have a plot. I can't recommend it personally. Then I read Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Another 5-star read, like I said. This is her latest release, and she is releasing another book in 2025. The premise of this one is really interesting, but I'm not going to go into details of it because everyone on the internet talks about Abby Jimenez, so there's no way you haven't already heard about this book or this author, but just know I liked it. 5 stars. So next I read Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. The premise of this book is very similar to the premise of Powerless, the fantasy book, but this is technically considered YA fantasy. I thought it was really interesting, but I ended up giving it a 3 stars just because it read like a YA, and I think as someone who's a little bit older, you know, I'm an adult. It's just one of those books where I think if I was in middle school, I would have absolutely loved this, but now that I'm older and an adult, I have some criticisms of it, just the way it's written. I can understand why it's written this way because it is a YA, but overall it was okay. That's why I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. I don't hate it. I thought the premise was good. Then I have Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I gave this a 5 stars. I was of the opinion that in order for you to have a good romance book, you need to have dual point of view because it's hard to really get that invested into the romance equally if you don't know a lot about the other character, especially if you only read everything through one character's mind. I thought it was really unfair to like love the romance as much as other books. I feel like I'm not making any sense. Pretty much this is one person point of view and it's a romance story, and I loved it. I thought it was great. Again, this is one of those books where the problems in the romance were creative, were original, and they were realistic. I feel like it was realistic. Not even what's happening, but the problems that come up. And I really enjoyed it. This is such a fast read. I highly recommend it. I literally read it in 2 days. So the next book I read I do not own, and it is Heartless by Elsie Silver. So all of these books are on Kindle Unlimited, which is how I read them. So this is the second book in the Chestnut Springs series, and this follows one of the other brothers in it. And again, cowboy romance, 5 stars. The whole series is 5 stars, but this one specifically is 5 stars. I loved it so much. All you have to know, it has a single parent trope, and it was written really, really well. So out of all of the Chestnut Springs series, this is one of the books that is tied in the #1 spot for me. It's one of my favorites. If I really had to pick, I think it got bumped down to #2 by another book, but it's up there, and a lot of people love this book. And then the next book I read is Reckless by Elsie Silver. So this is my favorite book in the whole series. I think this man was written so well. And I think this man actually deserves the title of fiction boyfriend. There's a lot of people that point to characters and they're like, oh, they're my fiction boyfriend, and they would be so good as a fictional boyfriend. And I'm like, they're terrible people. They are terrible romance partners. But this man deserves that title. So that's all I'm gonna say. I highly recommend this series if you cannot tell. And this one was my favorite. Next I read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, another 5-star read. Some of the tropes in this book are small town romance. I'm trying to recall so many details about all these books. My brain feels a little like hazy. I feel like that's all you have to know. It's a small town romance. It's really, really cute. Then I have Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this is another 5 stars. Literally, I can't remember what month this was, but it was 5 star after 5 star after 5 stars. This book is a great example of how you can have a flawed character that is not fully lovable, but the story can still be amazing. It was beautiful, it was heartbreaking, it was emotional, it was exciting, and it was well written. I read this book so quickly. I highly recommend it. I thought it was amazing. At the moment, this is my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book, is Carrie Soto is Back. So everyone should read it. Then I read The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I ended up giving this a 3 stars. I would say that there are 2 main kind of like twists or surprises in the book, and I did end up up guessing one of them. I don't know. Overall, I thought it was okay. It was like a palate cleanser. I'm not gonna read the second book. Since it was like a thriller book, it did honestly make me really nervous. And I was kind of skimming through chapters because I really wanted to know what happens. And I feel like that's not the best thing to do in books, and I can see why people love it, but it just wasn't for me. If you're still watching these videos, literally props to you. Thank you so much. We are almost done, I promise. Next, I read Powerless, and I gave it 4 stars, which is, it's not my favorite book, but I read it, and I just realized I forgot to mention that I read Hopeless. I read Hopeless after Flawless, and I never talked about it. I gave Hopeless 3 stars, and I feel like universally that is like the least liked book of Elsie Silver, but I still think everyone should read the series. Then I read the whole Summer I Turned Pretty series, and I did make a whole video about it, so I recommend checking that one out. Overall, I thought they were cute for what they were supposed to be. I thought they were great. I mean, 4 stars, YA romance. I enjoyed the show, and I can see why these books are so popular. I am really losing steam here, so I'm going to try to go through these next books as fast as possible. I have Emily Henry's Happy Place. I gave this book 2 stars. I didn't love it. Please, if you want a full breakdown as to my thoughts on this book, why I rated Beach Read and then Happy Place so differently, please go to this video and then to this specific part. I take my time and I thoroughly explain my criticism of the book. I'm just gonna save my breath. Go check out the other video. Then I read Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. I gave this 4 stars. This is another cowboy romance, and I feel like this is often put in the same pot as the Elsie Silver books, but I don't think these are as good as the Elsie Silver books, but they're still pretty good. I read them pretty quickly, and there's 2 more books in this little interconnected series that I haven't read, but if you're into cowboy romance, Done and Dusted. Then I read Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli, and I gave that a 5 stars. Thought that was a great book. It was amazing. It's one of my first fantasy books. I thought it was great. There's a new release coming out in February, and I'm so excited to read it, and I highly recommend everyone read it. Then I read When He Was Wicked, and I gave this a 4 stars, and then I also read the novella. So this is Francesca Bridgerton's story, and yeah, it was cute. You guys, I'm so sorry. I'm so tired. It was a 4 stars. Let's move on. The last books are from the same author, and I don't have them with me, and it is Shutout and Offside by Avery Keelan. Shutout I gave 4 stars, and then Offside I gave 3 stars. Offside is technically first and then is Shutout, and you can tell. Offside just felt like there was not much direction going on. There was so much happening. There was 4 different tangents going on at the same time. The plot felt really messy, but then Shutout was really, really good, or at least it was good for like a romance, like an easy cheesy romance. You can tell the author did a lot of growth in between the 2 books, so I really recommend her, but just don't start with Offside. Like, don't, just read Shutout. It was really good. Those are all the books I read in 2024. If you have made it this far into the video, I'm exhausted. I have nothing else to say. Thank you so much, and I will see you in 2025.